Shalom family. So let's look at some of the most recent Israeli news, what's coming out of Israel, what's happening in Israel. Obviously we know they're busy with the Rafah operation now, which I said they were going to go ahead and do anyway, regardless of international backlash, and that is exactly what they're doing right now. First one is House Democrats, not Republicans, Democrats. We cannot undermine our ally Israel. 26 Democratic members of Congress urged White House to deliver security aid to Israel after the Biden administration canceled the shipment because of the Rafah operation. Now, I find this interesting that the Democrats are even seeing the folly in this move. That's interesting. The group of 26 Democrats on Friday wrote to U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan expressing deep concern about the arms shipment to Israel withheld. The letter was spearheaded by U.S. Representative Josh Gottheimer and Jared Golden. We are deeply concerned about the message the administration is sending to Hamas and other Iranian-backed terrorist proxies by withholding weapons to Israel during a critical moment in the negotiations. Now that is exactly that. By not standing with your ally Israel, you are showing them, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. We won't even give them weapons. We won't support them with the ability to fight or defend themselves if things got even worse. That emboldens Iran, which by proxy emboldens all of her proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, everybody else. They all feel stronger and braver and can beat their chests and attack Israel because there's no fear that anyone's coming to her rescue. They just unfortunately don't read the Bible, because we know that it will come to a point where Israel will stand alone, specifically the Gog-Magog war, and God will be the one who steps in. God, not the power of the IDF, not the supply of the allies or the friends. God. Biden's policy marks a dark turning point in U.S.-Jewish relations. American Jews, traditionally Democratic supporters, criticized Biden's decision to halt military aid to Israel, signaling a shift in political allegiance. American Jews publicly criticized Biden for the first time since his election in a manner they had never criticized the Democratic president. Biden's decision to halt ammunition aid to Israel signified a watershed moment in the historical relationship between American Jews and the Democratic Party. This policy shift, articulated in a recent CNN interview, and yes, I know you can't trust CNN, but sometimes stories are actual stories that actually happened, just reported by people that usually report lies. The Biden defended his stance. It's not merely a logistical recalibration, but a dramatic pivot that might redefine the political landscape in the US, particularly concerning the American Jewish community. Now, why that's interesting for me is, like they say, a watershed moment, a huge pivot. He's sticking to it, and that has now upset some of his biggest and wealthiest supporters at a time when he is going to be running against his arch nemesis Trump coming up very, very soon in the months ahead. And if all these Jews pivot and shift to Trump, whether they hate him or not, because he's selling pro-Israel and support Israel and protect Israel, and they need the same, they take everything across to him. Who do you think's a shoe-in for the White House? Biden's got a bigger problem on his hands right now. And usually, when politicians see their supporters and backers shifting away from them because of something they've done, they very quickly retract or change what they've said. So let's see in the days ahead. Maybe there's a huge turnaround coming when he realizes he's losing what he needs to be able to, him or whoever's replacing him in the Biden White House, to stand against Trump. Then the Belgian Prime Minister pushes the EU to impose sanctions on Israel. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo is calling for the European Union to impose sanctions on Israel's Judea and Samaria region over the Jewish state's war against Hamas in Gaza. Can we now simply continue with Israel as a trading partner? I do not think so, he said in an interview. We can't just stand by and use big words. We can't let this happen, he continued. He singled out dates, olive oil, and wine as targets for potential trade sanctions. Belgium is home to a large Muslim population and is highly critical of Israel. So the immigrants, the illegal immigrants, and those that they brought in legally, all of them Muslim, are now showing the power of how they're forcing the thinking and the talking and the political reasoning from a top level, because they've infiltrated far enough. And this was the plan all along. Red Cross official exposed as a Hamas stooge. Are they going to riot about Red Cross now? Are they going to have things at the universities about the Red Cross? Are they going to go to the UN about the Red Cross? No, because it's not Jews and it's not Israel. Fact. International Committee of the Red Cross is at best a glorified taxi service for Hamas. Meet Haitham Ethan Abid. He runs the International Red Cross in Montreal. His job is to be neutral. Abid marches in Free Palestine rallies, posts Hamas videos saying hostages love their captors, and accuses Israel of terrorism and genocide. Then he swears, I'm not even going to repeat everything he says here, and he tweets UN Watchers Elal Newer. In a Facebook post the day after October 7's massacre, he posted a photo of the 2000 killing of Mohammed al-Dura in the Gaza Strip, even though the incident was exposed years ago as a staged Hollywood scene. Fake. Abid's intention was clear. He was justifying the killing, the maiming, the raping, the torturing, the putting babies in ovens of October 7 as merited retribution. That's according to the UN Watch. Again, no one's going to talk about that. It's going to disappear in the news cycle, and everyone will move on to hating Israel. UNRWA caught stealing and selling humanitarian aid, according to the UN Watch. According to the report, Palestinians claimed that staff working for the UN agency have their homes full of aid. UNRWA was caught stealing and selling this aid to Palestinian civilians. The Watch report claims those who report UNRWA's actions face reprisals. According to the report, Palestinians claim that staff working for the UN agency have homes full of aid, and the warehouse chief sold 50 cartons of food for $5,000. So you're sending aid to them. It's going in with the UNRWA. It's free. It's a gift of love to help those in need. They are keeping the aid for themselves. They're supplying Hamas with that aid, and they are selling what they want to sell at exorbitant prices to those in need. Sounds like a nice place. Items such as Pampers, canned sweets, tissues, all sold at the UNRWA school door. Former UNRWA employee Hatham al-Sayed ran the chat room that exposed the agency's theft and selling of aid. The UN Watch reported he created several chat rooms for staff and educators to share posts, many of which featured anti-Semitism, incitement to hatred, jihadi terrorism in the entire 2 decades that he worked for the agency. I'm going to keep saying it. Israel keeps saying it. I 100% agree. They need to dismantle UNRWA and remove them from Israel completely. They are part of the terrorist organization. They perpetuate hate through education and action and everything else. They should not be there. They are a huge part of the problem. But then so is the United Nations. So is everything that's part of that, because it's all anti-Semitic at the core. It's anti the God of the Bible. Israel-Gaza war live. Israel intensifies attacks on Jabalia refugee camp, Egypt, to support South Africa's ICJ case against Israel. So Egypt's joined South Africa and Iran and Turkey and everyone in their case against Israel. Their pathetic case, claiming genocide, which it is not. Whereas all of Hamas and all the terror groups openly and regularly speak, chant, and say that they want all the Jews wiped out, which, by the way, is genocide. Not that anyone sees it that way, because it's just Jews. Very like Nazi World War II mentality that's pervaded the entire planet right now. Israel moves deeper into Rafah. Rafah is considered Hamas' last stronghold. Some 300,000 of the more than 1 million civilians sheltering there have fled the city following evacuation orders from Israel, which says it must invade to dismantle Hamas and return scores of hostages from Israel in the October 7 attack that sparked the war. Neighboring Egypt issued the strongest objection yet to the offensive, saying it will formally join South Africa's case at the ICJ, alleging genocide in Gaza, an accusation Israel rejects. So go ahead, Egypt. You will join South Africa and all the other countries that stand against Israel, fight against Israel, and hate on Israel in the Valley of Decision. One of these days in the years ahead, when God brings all the nations there who he needs to deal with. Read the Bible. Israel stands on the front lines of the fight for civilization. Say 80 former US generals and admirals. Now, this is interesting. The Jewish Institute for National Security of America warned that Iran and its proxies are watching closely to see if the United States will abandon its ally. Spoiler alert, done. Given our experience as retired American military leaders, we are very concerned about the security impacts of increasingly strained US-Israeli ties. As Israel becomes a growing source of domestic division, the group wrote. The group stated it feels compelled to declare that a strong Israel is vital to the United States national security, and it is imperative that America unequivocally stand by this indispensable ally. The only democracy in that part of the world that allows everyone to practice whatever faith they want, to live in peace and do everything they want, but all of that is hidden in lies, and it is said that it's exactly the opposite. The Jinsa letter named Iran and its terrorist proxies as barbaric, declaring them enemies of the United States and everything we stand for. Against these barbaric enemies, Israel stands on the front lines of the fight for civilization, the lone, stable, democratic American ally in a critical, tumultuous region. Even in facing adversaries who respect neither the laws of war nor human life, we believe Israel has fought in accordance with the laws of armed conflict. 80 generals tell you this, with a lifetime of experience of war and warfare. But the world's going to listen to everyone who is not a general and hasn't got this experience and claim everything contrary. So well done to the 80 generals for actually voicing their opinion for once. The Gaza war effect. How MBS bin Salman will use his new leverage to prop up Ramallah and sideline Israel. The kingdom is preparing to reap the political dividend of the war in Gaza in the wake of the Palestinian Authority's rise at the expense of Hamas. This would include a deal with the United States on security guarantees and a civilian nuclear program that leaves normalization with Israel out. The map has changed. Gaza is in ruins. Hamas is mostly looking for how to save its leaders in the Strip. This is not some bellicose statement from the Israeli defense minister, but the words of one of the commentators close to the Saudi royal family. It seems the kingdom is preparing to reap political fruit of the war in Gaza due to the strengthening of the PA at the expense of Hamas. Two senior officials in the Biden administration and the Saudi royal palace, the kingdom's foreign minister Faisal bin Farhan al Saud and US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. They made it clear at a conference held in Riyadh that an agreement between them is around the corner and that most of the details have been finalized. It appears then that a deal is taking place without Israel having a say, an agreement with three components. One, a bilateral agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia with security guarantees and assistance with a civilian nuclear program. Number 2, recognition of a Palestinian state by a series of European countries and perhaps even a move in the UN, which you've seen, which the US will not veto, to accept the Palestinian Authority as a full member state. This apparently is an irreversible path. Number 3, in return, the Saudis will open the oil tap, which will lead to lower prices in the US, and within a few months, Americans will go to the polls for the presidential elections happy and cheerful because of cheap gas at the pump. During these months, according to the emerging understandings, if Israel completes most of the war against Hamas, it will be able to turn to establishing relations with Saudi Arabia in return for further gestures towards the Palestinian Authority. PA President Mahmoud Abbas, incidentally, is playing his role well. This week he declared Israel has the right to security just as the Palestinians have the right to self-determination in an independent state. The Hamas people on social media were seething, but for the European audience in Riyadh, this was music to their ears. MBS and his advisors and people in power around him that he's working through very, very cleverly and for very, very long have been thinking through this and planning and plotting and putting their things together. And they are still going to play a very large role in how the landscape looks when all of this is shaken out and finished and done. So keep a close eye on that. It's definitely not something to dismiss or to look away from. It is something we should all be very focused on. In the meantime, and in summary of all these latest things, I want to again say, pray for Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for their hearts of stone to become hearts of flesh, for scales to fall from their eyes, for more and more of them to have God encounters and meet Yeshua, their Messiah, before Daniel's 70th week kicks off very, very shortly. Pray for all of those struggling in Gaza, everyone who's been displaced, hurt, lost loved ones. Pray for them in those situations as well. Pray for the enemies to have God encounters, because God can and has many times in history turned the hearts of sworn enemies that have set out for the destruction of his people to himself and turned their lives upside down. I give you Saul, who became Paul, for example. So pray for God to reach people, and then do whatever you can to pray for and support those ministries and people out there that are doing exactly that. Let's roll up our sleeves and get busy with ministry. Reach the people around you. Share gentle words. Love and assist, and listen to the Holy Spirit guide you with where you can touch people's lives for the better. The King is in the field. He's working hard. The miracle stories are rolling in all the time. What stops us from being in the field with him? I'd rather be in the field busy working with the Lord until he picks us up and takes us home and says, come my boy, we're done now. Let's go. Let's roll out the final week and be done with this. Let's just get our hands dirty, get in there, pray for people, make a difference. Less of me, more of him, always. God bless. Have a fantastic day. Shalom.